Hello and welcome to Rise of Humanity Personal Development for the Spiritual Warrior. I'm your host Chris Karamyar and I'm joined by returning guest Seb Karamyar again.
Hello.
Thanks for being here.
Thank you for having me again.
And we're just throwing together a impromptu last minute episode here today because I had some awesome scheduling issues with my guests that I was originally interviewing and it just didn't happen. So, but onwards and upwards, as they say. It's got to get in the game. So we're putting together this last minute episode and we're going to be talking about something very interesting, but something that I don't know a huge amount about. So, and that is the German philosopher Martin Heidegger. I've heard a little bit about his philosophy. It sounds very interesting. Seb's been researching this quite a lot, so just looking forward to talking about it and just seeing what happens. So take it away.
Okay, so it's a philosopher, German philosopher called Martin Heidegger. He lived from the end of the 1800s to the 1900s, so he's considered a modern philosopher, even though it might sound old. He worked in Germany. Essentially, Heidegger is one of the most profound philosophers, and he's the end target that you want to get to when you research philosophers. So it's generally recommended to make sure you've read maybe a lot of other philosophy, and then before you actually get on to his main book, which is Being in Time, read up on his life, learn who he is, understand why he asks the questions he asks, understand what his life was like, and read other works. I can recommend a book called Heidegger Basic Writings, which, even though it says basic writings, it isn't basic. It is very complicated, but it gives you a bit of an introduction. Also, maybe Heidegger, a graphic guide, or any introduction to Heidegger would be good to set you off. So basically, I'll start with the main thing with Heidegger. He is a philosopher, but it completely moves past that. It's more a whole life event, a whole way of life. But it all started with Heidegger was just a young man, seemed to enjoy thinking, and he read philosophers like, there's a philosopher called Husserl and another one called Hegel, I believe it's pronounced. They started his passion. They created something called phenomenology, which is it's almost a scientific way of studying human consciousness. What makes us what we are. So this interested Heidegger a lot, but he became probably as big a figure as them in the end. He
right.
just
said right,
yeah. He just saw, he couldn't see anyone was doing what he thought, so he wanted to bring his own beliefs to the table, essentially.
When you say Heidegger's more of an end target, do you mean that he's a culmination of all kind of philosophies and he's really brought it into something that's really kind of understandable and actionable, as opposed to these really esoteric philosophers who maybe are difficult to understand? Is that what you mean when you say come to him as a sort of an end target? He's more of the complete package.
Yeah, I mean his philosophies take from old philosophers, Aristotle, Plato, the two I mentioned, Husserl, Hegel, but it's more because it's just quite complex to understand. It's something that would be easier when you've had time to really get into that mindset of
so it's more complex, you would say?
Yeah, he's considered one of the most difficult philosophers.
So I thought you were saying he was a culmination of them and the most easy to understand.
Oh, sorry, no. It's the most fulfilling, and it's one of the greatest philosophies. But yeah, it's definitely the hardest to understand though. So that's why I say, and many others will say, that Heidegger's one you reached at the end or when you feel ready.
So yeah, so start off with some of the more well-known mainstream philosophers.
Yeah, maybe Nietzsche. He's probably a good one to start with, and then obviously Plato and Aristotle, and then slowly build up through time and get to the more modern ones.
Yeah. So what have you been through that journey then? Have you researched some of those mainstream philosophers and read about them, obviously, and then you've come across Heidegger?
Yeah, I've read through. I've got a few niche books. Plato, Aristotle.
Yeah.
Socrates. There's some who I'm currently exploring as well. Kierkegaard and Schopenhauer. But I haven't followed an orthodox path or anything, and I know that's what they do in universities in philosophy classes. And I know people who are like that, very academic minded. They follow a specific path and say you should follow from the beginning to the end, Plato, Aristotle, and then eventually Heidegger.
Curriculum.
Yeah, but I don't believe in that. I haven't done it, and I can understand Heidegger.
Yeah.
Heidegger's was one of the first I came to. You don't have to go through everyone else to get there. I mean, that's what's considered, but I don't believe it. I think if you're just that way minded, you'll understand it straight away. Even though he takes from other philosophers, it's obviously its own thing.
So you feel like it was kind of brought to you just in this non-linear kind of progression, really?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I'd heard about him, and I was quite interested in what he's saying, and just because people say he's complex, I was interested to see, why is it so complex? So yeah, I just came across him just in my own time.
Yeah. So let's get into the meat of it then. So what's different about Heidegger? How does he compare to the other guys, and what's his philosophy all about?
Yeah. So yeah, if I go into just who he is, so obviously I said when he was younger, he saw there was something that wasn't there that he thought was vital. So basically, Heidegger asked the question, what is?
What is?
What is. So we say this is a table, or this is a pencil, this is a book. But what actually is that is? No, we just say it normally, we just say that is this, that is that is this. But no one actually thinks what actually is that.
What's the underlying creative energy within it?
What is that? We just rush over it, and Heidegger thought that was terrible. He couldn't believe that people weren't thinking about what that is. What is this world? What are the things in this world?
Just took it for granted.
Yeah, he just thought people should be thinking about that more.
Yeah.
So he asked that question, and then the next one, and his main one, is what is being. So being is anything, mainly us. We're being now.
Yeah.
We are beings. And Heidegger wanted to ask what is being.
Right.
What is? I mean, obviously it's complicated, but what is us? What is being itself? He just thought it was an outcry that no one thought about this. And basically, what you can see when you read him, and he talks about it, he says throughout history, we forgot that question, being. What is being? He'll talk about Nietzsche and other modern philosophers and say that they took us away from that. They just said being was nothing, and they started thinking more of outside of the world rather than us. Heidegger wanted to be practical and think about us, what helps us now. Yeah. And they all he says they went away from that.
Yeah, so, I mean, it's kind of like that when you say he's an advanced philosopher, it's like those. His philosophies sound to me like they're incredibly simple, and they cut through just all the esoteric stuff that all philosophers talk about. But because people have lost connection so much with what they are, that it essentially makes what he's saying incredibly advanced.
Yeah, exactly.
But really, it should be something that people are asking themselves, quite a lot of the time. Is,
exactly,
what am I? What is this?
Yeah, and he couldn't believe it that people weren't asking that. So like you just said, he couldn't believe people weren't saying what is being and what is his. Wait, well that was the beginning, but what is being? He couldn't believe people asking that, and that's obviously why it's so profound, because no one does, and it was a radical thing really. When he suddenly asked that, it was a disturbance in philosophy, especially Western. Obviously, it was Western. No one was thinking about that at that time. And as he says, at the beginning, with Aristotle, they were asking that, and they were trying to. Obviously, that was near the beginning of philosophy. They were asking being, and they were saying, "What is being? What is this? What is that? Why is that like that?" But they never went far enough in.
Just skirted around it.
They skirted around it, and then they forgot about it, and then because no one wanted to touch it, it slowly got forgotten, and it got buried by other philosophers. So Heidegger wanted to bring it back and ask the question, what is being? So basically, when he said that, people started to listen. And I'll just say a little bit about him. He started to teach lots of classes. He started to become quite a big figure. And then...
So people were latching onto his ideas.
It was getting a lot of attention. People were thinking, oh, this is something different. And apparently, when he was getting into it, and then he started teaching lectures on being... later on, but first it was mainly about critiquing other philosophy,
right?
Like Aristotle, and apparently in his class in Germany he started asking these questions, which just astonished everyone, because he just was going somewhere where no one else had gone, and apparently he was even shocked himself at what he was asking. And the questions just went on. He was asking all these radical questions, which made people see things differently. And just giving these answers, and apparently the students were always in awe after each lesson, because Heidegger was just venturing on new ground, and that combines as well with what he thought. He believed so passionately in thinking itself. He said people forgot to think, and he was so passionate just about thinking and think about things, bringing new things to your mind by thinking. And one of his quotes, which I love to quote, is he says this was obviously in, I think, I'm not sure when he said it, the beginning of 1900s, but I think a lot of people it applies to now. He said the most thought-provoking thing in our thought-provoking time is that no one is thinking. and he saw that, but it might sound obvious now, but it wasn't then. It took someone to really push through, and he just saw that no one was thinking, and it was it just seemed terrible to him. Like I was saying now, that the human mind isn't being used, and so that's why it all connected to what is being. And he, like I said, he thought everyone had forgot about it.
I mean, the fact that his lectures started taking off such people are reacting in such a big way, I think that just shows that it's something people want to hear, even though it comes across as that esoteric. Just the fact that people react in such a profound way, I think that shows that it's something people need to hear, and probably it's still completely, totally relevant today, I would say. It's lasted, easily lasted through the ages. It's totally applicable today, I think. it's something. Self-awareness is something which would help the world massively if it was something that everyone was creating in their lives, in their consciousness.
Yeah, exactly, and that's essentially what Heidegger is trying to do. So, I mean, it's hard to sum up in a few minutes, but his whole, if you start reading into Being in Time, it goes past philosophy, and it's almost mystical, and it's very different. No one's used to it. He designs a way of life for how people should live. Not live like physically, but mentally.
Yeah.
And he designs these, I don't know if he designed words, but he used words in a different way, created a vocabulary for his way of life to wake people up. He thought using these words, it will wake up, like signals in our mind.
Yeah.
And bring us back to what we should be.
Like flick a switch in the brain.
Yeah.
It's very powerful language. We talk about NLP and stuff.
Yeah, exactly, yeah. He says, another quote is, he said, language is the house of being.
Right.
So, being, he says, is us, and he says language gets us there. He says language is very important.
The house of being.
Yeah. So being, when you read it, being, he refers to that as Dasein, which is spelled Dasein. Yeah. That's what he refers being as. So
that's his made-up word.
Well, that's a German word, but I think he used it in a way that wasn't normal.
Right. Yeah.
So language is the house of being. Dasein.
That's the word for it.
Yeah.
Yeah. I suppose the cool thing about that is once you read that word, you understand the definition. It creates that like you can kind of activate that awareness in your mind through just saying a word. Like this huge, like if the first time, for example, someone heard that in a lecture, like I'm a being, and the house is my language. Like whoa, like might take them a little while to process it. It might even take a few days, but once they channel it into that word Dasein, and they can just say it, and then like go to that awareness straight away. I suppose that's the power of he's condensing a big concept into just a single word, so that's pretty powerful.
That's exactly it. Yeah, when you hear something like language is the house of being, it makes someone, especially thinking that time, no one had heard anything like that. Using words like Dasein and words like that, it wakes people up and I think gets them interested, and it's thought-provoking in itself. I mean, another quote is, he says, I think it's, man is not the lord of being, but the shepherd of being. So he says that we shouldn't completely focus on ourselves. We should think about the whole world.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. So shepherd of being means we don't own that being. We don't own Dasein. We are Dasein, the being. But we're the shepherd of it. We should carry it along.
Yeah.
We're all as important as each other.
Yeah.
And we should all take it to... basically, he says there's a clearing where everything should be unconcealed.
It sounds like a very sort of holistic, compassionate approach to philosophy almost. I think a lot of philosophers in their ideas of the world, they don't necessarily say that people need to get along. Maybe talk about division and stuff. It's not. I don't think it's necessarily true that all philosophers believe in a good world, but the fact that he talks about that shepherd, the shepherd idea that's huge, really. It's a very powerful idea.
Yeah, I mean, I love that quote about the shepherd. But yeah, you're right. Heidegger is very human. His idea, but yes, it is almost holistic. It's mystic, and it's really something unique. like I said earlier, it's almost a way of life. Yeah, and like I was saying earlier, it's he, through all that with the shepherd and the being, he wants to take us to a clearing, which he says unconceals everything. Because he said things are concealed, the truth isn't shown to us, either items or people. And he wants to take it to the clearing,
right,
and unconceal it, because he believes in truth of the world, which I think also adds to what you're saying. It's very human, and it's. I don't know if I don't think he particularly planned out that it would help people, but in the end it did. It's so profound that it does. He just wanted to. The main thing he just said is what is being. That's all you just want to ask that. But through that, somehow he creates this whole life philosophy, really.
It's probably, maybe he didn't know about it at the beginning, but there's the natural progression of it to become more holistic and compassionate and contribute to the world.
Yeah, I mean, I think if I believe if the world abided by that and lived by that, it'll be undeniably a lot better. It'll be like a holy place, I think.
Yeah.
It'll be heavenly.
Yeah.
Because everyone would know each other, know themselves, accept who they are, don't have any baggage, and don't think they're better than the world or other people.
Yeah.
They'd all be their being.
And this is going off at a tangent a bit, but that's one of the things that I really love. It kind of completely changed my view, is listening to Michael Jackson talk about that, because he said in an interview, why can't the world be such a place where you can walk down the street and just walk into someone's house and just not know them, but just sit down and be friendly with them and have a conversation. Imagine just a world like that, and that completely. That was like a long time ago that I heard him talking that way, but it's a complete game changer. And I think it kind of seems like that ties into what Heidegger's saying. That once you clear the fog and reveal the truth, that there will be no conflict in humanity. It'll just be just truth and compassion and acceptance. I think acceptance and truth, and there would be no need for conflict. Because everyone would just understand, everyone would just be. And the word for unconceal was aletheia. That's Heidegger's word for that, unconcealment to the truth. So that's his word for unconceal. So I mean, obviously there's a huge amount of work written on him and by him. Just from what you've read so far and the research you've done, has he created like a blueprint or any like directions or action steps, or is it more kind of just the whole philosophy just spread out over an entire book?
Is that for what, people reading it, or other philosophers?
For people reading Heidegger's philosophy, can you read like has he summed it up in like 10 steps or anything like that, or is it you need to read the entire book really?
Yeah, obviously it is philosophy, so it goes, it's long musings and long paragraphs, and it is hard to read Heidegger. It's something you won't be able to just read it in a few minutes and then understand it. Right. Well, you might do, but it's something you got to study, and you have to come back to it. It's almost like a lesson, or a task. It's more like a task, not leisurely or entertainment or anything. Far from it. It's something you read, think about, ponder, and then come back, study it.
It's like a course in philosophy.
Almost. Obviously, it's not actually a course, but it seems like it. And it's something that takes a time, and you really have to let it flow in you and
internalize it.
Internalize it and just be with it, and over time, and then slowly you see the profundity in it. Yeah. And
so you recommend, if someone was to look into Heidegger's work, they really buy a few books and properly set some time aside to really absorb the information.
Oh, definitely, yeah. I mean, if you've never done philosophy, well, obviously I recommend philosophy. If you like thinking, it's very stimulating.
Yeah.
It's the place of thinking. If you've never read any philosophy, then maybe get a few beginner books. I think you can get Introduction to Philosophy. Read a few articles on the internet. Watch films. Films help me. Philosophical films.
Yeah.
If we talk about Terence Malick, his films actually use Heidegger as an influence. The director,
awesome.
he actually, I believe he translated some as well of Heidegger. Obviously, he's German.
Right.
Later on, I believe Malick used Kierkegaard, who I mentioned earlier. Well, yeah, watch films, and generally you just have to increase your capacity for thinking.
And this is a great way to do it, though.
Yeah. Challenge your thinking. Move on to complex things. Read a few introduction philosophies, then maybe go to Nietzsche, Plato, Aristotle, like I mentioned earlier. Descartes, a medieval philosopher. And then, Kierkegaard, Schopenhauer. And then when you feel ready, move on to Heidegger. And really take your time. As well as Heidegger, around the same level is obviously the people who influence him. There's someone called Hegel, Hegel.
Is he German as well, do you think?
I believe so, but I'm not.
Okay. Yeah.
Not 100% sure. And then another one called Husserl, who were the creators of phenomenology, and they influenced Heidegger. But they're also very complex. And then in the end you'll feel very fulfilled, and it's quite amazing, really, that there's people thinking like this. So of course I wholly recommend it.
Awesome.
And just try it.
Awesome. So can you just recommend some, obviously get an introduction to philosophy and stuff, but is it, with regards to Heidegger, can you recommend anything to begin with for anyone wanting to look into his work?
So probably like I did, Heidegger, a good one is Heidegger Graphic Guide.
Right.
It might sound graphic like a kid's thing, but it's really not. It's complex in itself. It basically gives you the overview of Heidegger and his being and time. That's another. I forgot to mention that time is very important to being. I just quickly mentioned he says time is very important to being itself, and through being, he wants to get to the transcendental horizon of temporality, the temporality of time. Which he does say, that's another thing, temporality wasn't, it hasn't been explored, time, in that way throughout philosophy properly. It's always been the same linear path.
Yeah.
And there's someone called Immanuel Kant who wrote the Critique of Pure Reason, and he explored time, but he stayed in the same path as the Greek philosophers, and Heidegger says he should have pushed on further. So that's another thing Heidegger does, he completely radicalised our view of time.
What perception of time?
Yeah, I mean, you'd have to read it, but it's connecting time, how we perceive time in a different way to before, and then he connects it with being. But back to that. So Heidegger, a graphic guide, it's a good way to understand.
Yeah.
Get any biography on Heidegger, anything just about his life, because it all helps, because obviously what he created came from how he lived.
Right.
And then next you want maybe basic writings by Routledge, Heidegger Basic Writings, and that it shows a bit of his main book, Being in Time, and it's sort of little snippets of different books. So if I read from the context, what is metaphysics, which is another thing that Heidegger completely radicalised, metaphysics. On the essence of truth, the origin of the work of art. Heidegger saw art as very important, and it was a crossover between worlds, nature and human being in the world. Art, he said, could tell the truth. Great art.
Wow.
Yeah, and then technology and what calls for thinking. So it's really good just to give you an overview. It's complex, so I recommend taking your time, especially his being in time introduction. It's it's complex, and then I haven't got it. But then when you're ready, move on to his main book, Being and Time, which is what he's famous for.
The big one.
Yeah, it's a huge book. It was never actually completed. No, he never completed it. It did like 2 sections, but he never did the end. But yeah, I think I read that he said that's almost what it's meant to be, to leave it like that. And then, but to be fair, it's all in there anyway, and it's obviously the amount he's been adorned. It obviously shows how profound it is when it's not even.
I didn't finish it on purpose.
I think it was. It sort of happened, but
yeah,
it
was okay left like that.
Yeah. Better to understand. Yeah,
that's interesting.
But I think the fact, like I said, it was still highly praised. Shows a lot. And then read through that, and gradually you'll be thinking in the way of Heidegger, and I think it'll make you see the world. Well, it'll definitely make you see the world differently. And if everyone read it, obviously, like we said, the world would be a much, much, much better place.
Yeah.
So.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for coming on the show and sharing this last minute.
Yeah. No, I'm glad to any chance to talk about Heidegger.
Yeah. And I'm glad to be able to talk about it. Definitely profound stuff, and glad to be able to get an episode out for all the listeners as well.
Yeah. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, so that is about it for today, folks. Thank you so much for listening. Definitely look into Heidegger's books if you are looking to expand your horizons. He's got clearly some very interesting things to say, so I can highly recommend that you do that. And so that's about it for today then. Thank you so much for listening, and I will catch you next time. Bye-bye.